Look at that square of focaccia from the bakery case, tesoro. Go on, look at it. Dry on top, pale underneath, a dusting of rosemary sitting on it like an apology. You buy it because the picture in your head is the golden one, the oily one, the one that shatters at the edge and steams in the middle. And you get home and it is bread wearing a costume. You dip it in oil to make it edible and you tell yourself it is fine. It is fine, tesoro, but some part of you knows. That is not focaccia. That is a thing shaped like focaccia. And maybe you tried to make it once. You followed the recipe with the beautiful photographs, and you mixed and you kneaded and you waited, and it rose a little or it rose a lot, and you pressed the dimples and you baked it, and it came out of the oven looking like the picture, and you cut it warm, and it was dense and dry and gray inside, a brick with herbs on it, and you ate one piece out of politeness to yourself and threw the rest to the birds, and you never told anybody, and you decided focaccia is a bakery thing, a Ligurian thing, a thing for people with sourdough starters and stone ovens and grandmothers in Genoa. Sit down, tesoro, because I have to tell you 2 things nobody ever told you, and the first one is going to lift a weight off you that you have carried since that brick. Your focaccia did not fail because of you. It failed because nobody told you that focaccia is not bread with oil on it. Focaccia is a dough that drinks oil. The oil is not a topping, it is an ingredient. And half of it goes into the pan before the dough ever touches it, and the dough rises in that oil, fries in it from the bottom while it bakes from the top, and the crumb drinks it all the way through. The dryness you ate was not your failure, it was the absence of the method. The second thing, you have been measuring the flour like a chemist when the water in dough is a living number, and until you learn to read the dough's mood instead of the recipe's cups, every dough you make will fight you. Today we learn the reading. You know me. I am Nonna. We cook the old way here, my mother's way, from the province of Caserta, where the focaccia came out on Friday because the bread oven was hot from the week, and the dough was the last thing the flour had to give. Last time we made the fresh pasta with 2 hands and no machine, and the comments filled with the shapes of your first sheets, islands, and clouds, and one that looked, I was told, like the profile of a difficult husband. Today, the focaccia. The whole recipe, every measure, is printed in the description, so you can cook along. Now, before the method, the folklore, because bread talk attracts more superstition than any other kitchen, and I have heard it all at my mother's table. The first folklore, you need the special flour, the strong one, the bread flour with the high protein number. It helps, tesoro, I will not lie to you. But my mother made focaccia with the same plain flour that made the pasta and the sundae cake, because the farm sold one flour and poverty sold no choices. Use what you have. The technique carries the loaf, and the technique is water and oil and time, and no bag of imported flour can substitute for any of the 3. The second folklore. Focaccia dough must be kneaded long and hard until it is smooth as silk. No, tesoro. Focaccia is a wet dough, the wettest dough in the family of breads, and wet dough is not kneaded, it is folded. A handful of turns, stretch and fold, every 20 minutes, 3 times, and the gluten builds itself while you are elsewhere, without the ache in your wrists. The old women did not have the forearms of stevedores. They had patience, and a bowl with a cloth over it. The third folklore, and this is the one that makes me set down my coffee. The dimples are decoration. The dimples, tesoro, are engineering. Those fingertips pressed into the dough are wells that catch the oil and the salt and hold them against the surface while it bakes, and they are stretch points that let the dough rise in the oven without tearing. Press them deep, press them with confidence, and press them just before the final rise, not after it. A focaccia dimpled after its rest collapses under your fingers and bakes flat and angry, and here is the mechanism underneath so you understand what you are doing, because dough that is understood cannot intimidate you again. Focaccia is high hydration, which is the baker's word for a lot of water, and the water does 2 jobs. It makes the crumb open and irregular, full of holes the size of a child's finger, the holes that hold the oil, and it makes the dough too soft to shape, which is why the whole method happens in the pan, not on the counter. The yeast makes gas, the gluten makes walls, and the oil makes the walls tender and gold, and keeps the crust from turning into armor. Your brick was dense because the dough was dry. Everything else follows from that one sentence. Now the method, exact and in order. Write it down. It is printed in the description. For one full pan of focaccia, the size of a small sheet pan, you need 500 grams of flour. All purpose is welcome in this kitchen. 400 grams of warm water, which is a very wet dough. Do not be afraid. 1 packet of yeast, 2 teaspoons, and 10 grams of salt, which is 2 teaspoons. And the oil, and here is where focaccia stops being bread. 1/4 cup of good olive oil for the pan and the top, at least. And if your conscience says that is too much, remember that the bakery's focaccia used more and charged you for the privilege. Step 1. The mixing, which takes 4 minutes and no machine. Warm water in the bowl, the yeast in it, stir once, and wait 5 minutes until it wakes and blooms on the surface. Then the flour and the salt, and stir with a spoon or a dough whisk or your hand until every dry pocket is gone and you have a shaggy, sticky lake of a dough. That is the whole mixing, tesoro. Do not knead it. Cover the bowl and walk away. Step 2. The folds, 3 of them, 1 every 20 minutes, and this is the kneading of a wet dough. With a wet hand, lift one side of the dough up and fold it over the middle, then the other side, then the near, then the far. 4 folds, 30 seconds, cover again. Each time you come back, the dough will be smoother and higher, and after the 3rd fold, it will be glossy and pull in long strands when you lift it. That shine is the gluten, made without a minute of kneading. Step 3. The pan and the first oil. Pour half your olive oil into the pan, the whole bottom, and spread it with your fingers up the sides. The dough, risen and glossy, tips out of the bowl onto the oil, and you turn it once, so both faces are anointed, and leave it alone to spread, and it will spread, slowly, on its own schedule, into the corners. Half an hour, 40 minutes, and if it is shy, oil your fingers and coax it gently. Never pull it hard, tesoro. Pulled dough snaps back and bakes tight and holds a grudge. Step 4. The dimples and the second oil, and this is the moment the focaccia becomes focaccia. Press your fingertips, straight down, all the way to the pan floor, dimple after dimple across the whole surface, close together, unafraid. The dough will sigh and puddle around your fingers. Then the rest of the oil over the top, poured into the wells, and coarse salt scattered while the oil is wet so it sticks and bakes into the crust instead of rolling off onto the pan. Rosemary if the mood is Ligurian, but my mother's focaccia wore only salt, and I will not report her to the authorities of Genoa. Step 5. The last rise, half an hour uncovered, while the oven heats to its highest setting, as hot as it will go, and a pan of water on the lower rack to make the oven steamy, because steam in the first minutes keeps the crust from sealing too early and lets the crumbs spring. Step 6. The bake. 20 to 25 minutes at the highest heat, and you are watching for the color, deep gold with brown at the dimple rims and edges, and the smell, which will bring the neighbors to the stairwell. Pull it, and here is the step the recipes forget. Leave it in the pan 10 minutes, so the bottom finishes frying in the oil it drank and the crust sets. Then out onto a rack, and if the bottom is not golden and slightly translucent with oil, next time more oil in the pan, without apology. And the honest words, because I promised you a kitchen without secrets. If the dough does not rise, your yeast was dead before it started, and the 5-minute bloom test before mixing is your insurance. No bloom, no yeast, new packet, begin again. If the focaccia is dense, the dough was dry, and next time, hold back a handful of flour and add it only if the mixing begs for it. Wet is right, wet is the method, and the fear of wet dough is the mother of every brick. If the top browned before the middle cooked, your oven runs hot, and slide the pan 1 rack lower and give it 5 more minutes. If the bottom stuck, the pan wanted more oil, and there is no such thing as too much oil in the pan of a focaccia. There is only such a thing as a pan that has not yet learned its job. Now the quiet word about that bakery case. 1.5 pounds of flour, pennies of yeast and salt, 1/4 cup of good oil, and the electricity of 1 hot oven, and you have the full pan for under $1.50. What the bakery sells by the square for $4, and what the supermarket sells in a plastic clamshell with an ingredients list longer than a novella. The dryness of the case focaccia is not an accident, tesoro. Oil is the most expensive ingredient in the pan, and every tablespoon the bakery saves is margin. and the shelf life of a wet, oily focaccia is 2 days, while the dry one sits for a week, and the case chooses the week every time, because the case is not feeding a family, it is feeding a spreadsheet. The old way is oilier than the case, because the old way was feeding children, not margins. So this Friday, you will do this. The wet dough in the morning, 3 folds while you do everything else. The oiled pan at noon, the dimples with your whole heart, the hot oven and the pan of water, and the 10 minutes of patience at the end, and then tear the first piece while it steams, the way it is meant to be eaten, with your hands, standing at the counter, the salt and the oil on your fingers. And come back and tell me in the comments what the crumb looked like when you tore it, the holes. I want to hear about the holes, big as a child's finger or small as a lentil, because the holes are the fingerprint of your water and your flour and your Friday, and no 2 pans in the world have the same ones. And tell me if your family called it focaccia or pizza, because half of Italy's grandmothers called this exact pan pizza, and the argument is older than the country, and I want to watch it in the comment section. Next time in this kitchen, the meatballs and the biggest lie the internet tells about them. Bring your wooden spoon. Today you start with a wet dough and you do not fear it. You fold it 3 times and let time knead. You give the pan its oil like a woman honoring a promise. You dimple with your whole hand and salt like the sea is watching. And you pull from the oven the golden thing the case was only imitating. The women who fed their families gave the pan its oil because oil was love you could measure, and that, tesoro, is the inheritance, and it pours.